Okay. Let's get started. I think we're on 15.6, right? I think we did, yeah. Let's see. Oh, yeah, didn't you read the first part? So that's the first line, and then it's short comment, and then that second part. And then the commentary, Jaden can read.
Sushong
Sushong.
asked about getting by in the world. Sing. Although the basic meaning of sing is conduct, practice, or behavior, the context of the passage makes it clear that Sushong is asking about successfully conducting oneself in the world, making progress, getting ahead, or getting along with others. The master replied, "In your speech, be dutiful and trustworthy, and in your conduct, be sincere and respectful. In this way, you will always get by in the world, even if you find yourself in some barbarian state. If your words are not dutiful and trustworthy, and your conduct is not sincere and respectful, how can you possibly get along, even in your own region? When standing still, visualize these principles standing by your side. When riding in your carriage, see them resting before you on the crossbar. Only then will you get by in this world." Sushong then wrote these words on the end of his sash.
Sushi is probably correct in seeing this as similar to Sushong's earlier question in 1220 about being accomplished. In both cases, Sushong asks about an external success in the world, and Confucius then directs his attention inward, towards his own behavior. As Zhu explains, the master's evidence is to always keep your mind upon dutifulness, trustworthiness, sincerity, and respectfulness, never forgetting them for an instant. Wherever you are, imagine them being present with you, as if you could see them. In this way, even if you want to depart from them for a moment, you will be unable to do so. In order to help himself in this task of constant visualization, Zhejiang writes the master's words, or perhaps merely the names of the virtues themselves, on the dangling end of his sash, so that they will always and literally be in his sight.
Something very Hebraic to me about the advice and the way that it is to be remembered as well. It's reminding me of Proverbs a little bit, but it's mainly the like the write it on your gates, write it on your doorposts sense of it, and the way that it's put in the Old Testament. But apart from that, it's more important, I think, to look at the actual terms that are used as those to remember and keep near at hand. Basically have something to keep so constantly before you and close to you that they can't be avoided or forgotten. And so these aren't just words being thrown out by Confucius, but it's assumed that his disciple Sushong actually has some sense of what those virtues actually mean. Those in particular being dutifulness, trustworthiness, sincerity, and respect. But I would say his understanding of those terms did not just come from like a teaching that Confucius had, but more so the way that he was able to demonstrate those virtues himself. And so how I guess the question is that it's always worth asking with these Analects is how do we see those things present or reflected in our own lives or our own motivations as to like what we're wanting to carry ourselves as. Because the big thing about this is getting by in the world, which has to do, as we saw, with conduct. So how you carry yourself.
See it kind of as a way of showing the culture, for sure, of living a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because I even think about sometimes just things that I've observed in like Christianity and the way that we are tempted, I guess, to speak of others of, you know, what we believe in, which is not a bad thing, and there's certainly times for that. I think, at least for me, a lot of the ways that I felt drawn to this way of life is by seeing just a dutiful, a respectful person in every aspect of life, you know, where it's less of, you know, obviously it's talking about speech as well, so being sincere and being genuine in what you say and being, you know, true to that is obviously followed up by action, like he likes to say a lot. But to me, it just kind of feels like a different way of passing along culture, where we think we would need to say certain things or to even like emphasize culture specifically. But instead of that, maybe it really is just being doing all these things in all of our arenas of life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely, you know, not to like try to point to me, but I've seen that as something that's living for sure in some of the things that I do, just because of like work, you know, where I work in the shop. They've kind of come to me a lot of times and told me why they want me to continue to work for them and why they want me to invest myself in the business. And it's usually because I was listening and because I did what I said I would do. Like just very simple things. And it's crazy how much that is like a rare thing these days, because it's just a very basic way of life. But somebody who is able to literally just live what they say is something very special.
The closer you can get your actions to your words, the better. The more powerful your words are going to be.
Yeah.
On my old phone, I had a list of stuff like this, and I can remember basically none of it. But the first headline is basically like things that require no talent. It just, you know, if you do it, you are going to be successful. And it sounds humbling now, but I remember reading it in woodshop, and it was just a lot of stuff like show up, listen, literally the simplest things, because that's what is taken for granted. The hardest thing to do is be consistent.
I like the picture of like them standing by your side too, and riding with you wherever you go.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it is a living thing that you engage with. It's not just dormant truth or whatever.
Would each of you say that you have principles? Everybody thinks so?
And principles and what?
That we carry?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you feel you are adhering to them?
I would say sincerity is one I always strive to carry.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that's I would say the most important to me currently.
So if you're able to offer some just some input on what you believe that means for you and how that's maybe even further why that one particular is important for you.
I think it's probably due to the type of person that I used to be. That mostly being a liar and a someone who very often would, I suppose, put on a face in most social interactions because it was too exhausting to be myself. And the point I got to in my life when everybody knows you as a liar and nobody actually knows who you really are because you never act yourself, you find yourself very lonely because nobody trusts you and nobody even wants to know you. And I did not like that point in my life. And I remember around the same time that I started coming to the culture center, I recognized those things within myself, and I made, I guess, a commitment to myself that no matter how uncomfortable or how brash I may come across, that I am not going to hide from people anymore. I'm not going to lie about things. I'm not going to pretend that things are okay when they are not okay in my life. And if I am rejected for that, then so be it. But I refuse to be artificial. And so I carry sincerity to the best of my ability, not just for the sake of it being a good virtue, but for the sake of not falling back into old habits that I know I'm inclined to do.
It makes all the difference. And almost, yeah, a lack of sincerity almost feels the same as not like giving your all in a situation. And when you don't do that, you don't even make full mistakes anymore because you weren't committed to it in the first place. So you stop learning if you're not able to be yourself in a situation.
It also makes things less painful when you are insincere with them. You can always play it off or pretend that it doesn't matter as much as it does. You don't have that ability when you are sincere. And so it also makes things hurt a lot because you don't have something to hide behind when something bothers you. And Isaac often gets the brunt of that, with me being a little over dramatic at times. I prefer it to
Yeah, it's genuine.
trying to hide behind things.
I feel like sincerity can be categorized as one of those elusive wu-wei things. but what I mean by that is it's a thing that the more effort you try to put into being it, the more difficult it is to actually be it, if that makes sense. Because sincerity is not like this state of mind you're able to detect in yourself and kind of feel like, yeah, I'm being sincere right now. I mean, that's actually the kind of word or phrase that we'll use to describe ourselves or to describe another person as in the former, I'm being sincere. And then when describing someone else, we usually say, that felt really sincere. I'm not saying all of that is invalid, but I think the truest sincerity is not one that we are all that conscious of, especially when it's coming from ourselves. It's actually, it's something that just kind of pours out of us. That's not in such a way that's not really in our control. It's a natural mode of behavior, and so in a way, even from kind of a further step back, sometimes even dishonest behavior can still be, in the manner of speaking, sincere behavior, because it's coming from a dishonest heart. And a dishonest, or an expression of the heart, is sincere behavior. Now, obviously, I'm also not validating dishonest behavior at all. But it's what I'm kind of equating here is sincere behavior to natural and uninhibited behavior. So, if you want truly good and sincere behavior, then there's something that has to change about your heart. And that's what I see you saying, Jaden. It's not, you're not just trying to pick apart your certain aspects of your personality as much as you're seeking a fundamental change within yourself, or we could say in your inner man or in your heart. And that is what will actually bring true sincerity. And that's the case for every single one of us. Regardless of our backgrounds and our own weaknesses and struggles there. So sincerity in that sense cannot ever be, or true sincerity cannot ever be without a sense of uprightness or having a clean conscience. In fact, I don't think any sort of sincerity is possible without a clean conscience. Because even an effort at sincerity, but if you, with an unclean conscience, it will never succeed. You'll actually never be able to act from your heart, because there will always be something the heart is protecting or afraid of or harboring in itself that will never allow for that real release of clear and true and sincere behavior. And that's why Confucius is, as we saw in the commentary, they're always addressing the inner life when it comes to even questions of how do I go about things in the outer life. Because you won't be able to go about them in the way that you're expecting to or that you desire to if certain things in yourself aren't addressed first. I was thinking with this Analect and a few things that Benji had mentioned of a part of a chapter from Chuang-Tzu. I think I've mentioned that text a little bit. It's one of the Taoist texts. But it's funny because in it there are a lot of stories about Confucius and his disciples that are probably, if not almost certainly, not historically accurate. But they're used as kind of like these symbolic examples to express some point. So I'll read a part of that chapter just because it's kind of entertaining. I feel like it applies to this in some ways. So two characters that we're very familiar with. Yang Hui, you guys remember who he is? The young, very talented disciple who was Confucius' best disciple, who also died young. He comes up to Confucius and asks permission to take a trip. Confucius asks him, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to Wei." What will you do there? And then Yang Hui replied, I have heard that the ruler of Wei is very young. He acts in an independent manner, thinks little of how he rules his state, and fails to see his faults. It is nothing to him to lead his people into peril, and his dead are reckoned by swampfuls like so much grass. His people have nowhere to turn. I have heard you say, Master, leave the state that is well ordered and go to the state in chaos. At the doctor's gate are many sick men. I want to use these words as my standard in hopes that I can restore his state to health. So you see, Yang Hui is coming across as a little bit ambitious here. He wants to go into the state and through his moral example and teaching, which he received from Confucius, change the heart of the ruler. Ah, said Confucius, you will probably go and get yourself executed. That's all. The way doesn't want things mixed in with it. When it becomes a mixture, it becomes many ways. With many ways, there is a lot of bustle. And where there is a lot of bustle, there is trouble. Trouble that has no remedy. The perfect man of ancient times made sure that he had it in himself before he tried to give it to others. When you're not even sure what you've got in yourself, how do you have time to bother about what some tyrant is doing? Do you know what it is that destroys virtue and where wisdom comes from? Virtue is destroyed by fame, and wisdom comes out of wrangling. Fame is something to beat people down with, and wisdom is a device for wrangling. Both are evil weapons. Interesting how wisdom is being described here, because in some senses wisdom is described as a very good thing, in other senses it's described as basically a mechanism of man's intelligence to twist things up. Not the sort of thing to bring you success. Though your virtue may be great and your good faith unassailable, if you do not understand men's spirits, though your fame may be wide and you do not strive with others, if you do not understand men's minds, but instead appear before a tyrant and force him to listen to sermons on benevolence and righteousness, measures and standards, this is simply using other men's bad points to parade your own excellence. You will be called a plaguer of others. He who plagues others will be plagued in turn. You will probably be plagued by this man. And suppose that he is kind, and suppose that he is the kind who actually delights in worthy men and hates the unworthy, then why does he need you to try to make him any different? You had best keep your advice to yourself. Kings and dukes always lord it over others and fight to win the argument. You will find your eyes growing dazed, your color changing, your mouth working to invent excuses, your attitude becoming more and more humble, until in your mind you end up by supporting him. This is to pile fire on fire, to add water to water, and it's called increasing the excessive. If you get in at the beginning, there will be no place to stop. Since your fervent advice is almost certain not to be believed, you are bound to die if you come into the presence of a tyrant. In the ancient times, Jie put Guan Longfeng to death, and Zhao put Prince Bigan to death. Both Guan Longfeng and Prince Bigan were scrupulous in their conduct, bent down to comfort and aid the common people, and used their positions as ministers to oppose their superiors. Therefore, the rulers, Jie and Zhao, utilized their scrupulous conduct as a means to trap them, for they were too fond of good fame. In ancient times, some more examples here, Yao attacked Kongzhi and Zhao, and Yu attacked Yu Hu. That's a lot of names. And these states were left empty and unpeopled, their rulers cut down. It was because they employed their armies constantly and never ceased their search for gain. All were seekers of fame or gain. Have you alone not heard of them? Even the sages cannot cope with men who are after fame or gain, much less a person like you. So he really kind of grilled you on Quaker, and finally he says, however, you must have some plan in mind. Come, tell me what it is. And so it's kind of reconsidering here. Yang Hui said, if I am grave and empty-hearted, diligent and of one mind. Won't that do? Confucius responds, goodness, how could that do? You may put on a very fine outward show and seem very impressive, but you can't avoid having an uncertain look on your face any more than an ordinary man can. And then you try to gauge this man's feelings and seek to influence his mind. But with him, what is called the virtue that advances a little each day would not succeed, much less a great display of virtue. He will stick fast to his position and never be converted. Though he may make outward signs of agreement, inwardly he will not give it a thought. How could such an approach succeed? But he responds again, well then suppose I am inwardly direct, outwardly compliant, and do my work through the examples of antiquity. By being inwardly direct, I can be the companion of heaven. Being a companion of heaven, I know that the Son of heaven and I are equally the sons of heaven. Then why would I use my words to try to get men to praise me or to try to get them not to praise me? A man like this people call the child. This is what I mean by being a companion of heaven. By being outwardly compliant, I can be a companion of men. Lifting up the tablet, kneeling, bowing, crouching down, this is the etiquette of a minister. Everybody does it, so why shouldn't I? If I do what other people do, they can hardly criticize me. This is what I mean by being a companion of men. By doing my work through the examples of antiquity, I can be the companion of ancient times. Though my words may in fact be lessons and reproaches, they belong to ancient times and not to me. In this way, though I may be blunt, I cannot be blamed. This is what I mean by being companion of antiquity. If I go about it in this way, will it do? So this is turning out to be a little bit of a longer reading, but you're kind of seeing how Jan is shifting his idea of how he's going to tackle this project of converting a ruler's heart from it being, just a matter of his own morally upright example. And then Confucius criticizes that pretty quickly. And then it's like, well, what if I basically model my behavior entirely off of the way that things were in ancient times, which is more or less something everyone agrees on as being good. And so everything that I do from that point is not even representative of my own motives, but it is me being as clear an expression possible of the ancient way. So how could anyone argue with that? And Confucius says, goodness, how could that do? You have too many policies and plans, and you haven't seen what is needed. You will probably get off without incurring any blame, yes, but that will be as far as it goes. How do you think you can actually convert them? You are still making the mind your teacher. Yang Hui finally says, I have nothing more to offer. May I ask the proper way? And Confucius says, you must fast. I will tell you what that means. Do you think it is easy to do anything while you have a mind? If you do, bright heaven will not sanction you. Yang Hui said, my family is poor. I haven't drunk wine or eaten any strong foods for several months. So, can I be considered as having fasted? That is the fasting one does before a sacrifice, not the fasting of the mind. May I ask what the fasting of the mind is? Confucius said, make your will one. Don't listen with your ears. Listen with your mind. No, don't listen with your mind, but listen with your spirit. Listening stops with the ears. The mind stops with recognition. But the spirit is empty and waits for all things. The way gathers in emptiness alone. Emptiness is the fasting of the mind. Yang Hui said, before I heard this, I was certain that I was Hui. But now that I have heard it, there is no Hui. Can this be called emptiness? That's all there is to it, said Confucius. Now I will tell you, you may go and play in his birdcage, but never be moved by fame. If he listens, then sing. If not, keep still. Have no gate, no opening, but make oneness your house and live with that, and live with what cannot be avoided. Then you will be close to success. And there's one more part of it. It is easy to keep from walking. The hard thing is to walk without touching the ground. It is easy to cheat when you work for men, but hard to cheat when you work for heaven. If you have heard of flying with wings, but you have never heard of flying without wings. You have heard of the knowledge that knows, but you have never heard of the knowledge that does not know. Look into that closed room, the empty chamber where brightness is born. Fortune and blessing gather where there is stillness. But if you do not keep still, this is what is called sitting, but racing around. Let your ears and eyes communicate with what is inside, and put mind and knowledge on the outside. Then even the spirits will come to dwell, not to speak of men. This is the changing of the 10,000 things, the bond of Yu and Chun, the ancient sage kings, the constant practice of Fusher and Jichu. How much more should it be a rule for lesser men? There's quite a lot there. I think it would be a really cool passage to explore more just because of how many interesting things were said. But are you seeing how this applies somewhat to that conversation of how to get by in the world or to carry yourself? Because what one really big thing that's addressed there is actually what is a part of that conversation of Wu Wei, which is motive and purposes and strategies that we have, even if not especially in good and virtuous things and behavior, and how that almost constantly undermines itself. But I think I've done enough reading and commenting. I want to hear more of what some of y'all's thoughts are from even what we read there, if anything.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting that he had a mission for himself to do, and then it ends up being that he needed to completely empty himself, and that there actually was no mission for him in that way. It just kind of goes back to what I was saying with the way that we think we need to, impart culture to others, right? Because he really wanted to, maybe even out of just like a dutifulness that he thought of, wanting to bring light to somebody, to be able to help them to see better how to rule. And what really needed to happen was for his own heart to be in the right place. And, that ruler may never even meet Yang Hui, but maybe his way of living life will impact him in some way. I mean, that's not like the point either of his life, is to impact others, but more to just be one with the way.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Got humble pretty quick.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, the most humbling part was a very stark realization that, like, you can go there to do everything right, and, you know, the state of the relation is the state of them. They're going to find you annoying and probably kill you. Which, it's a very powerful wisdom of oh, my head's empty. Well, I lost it. Hold on. But, yeah, no, that, yeah, if they were good and righteous people and willing to listen, they wouldn't have needed you to impart this wisdom upon them. How they're acting right now is how they're acting because that's what they're doing. Their actions do represent them, and it is not going to benefit them or you to act to help in their stead. They have to realize something.
Yeah, there's a lot about this. I was thinking about this when I had read it a little bit ago. But there's a lot about this passage that actually really tempers, or maybe to put it a little more harshly, kind of criticizes a lot of the way we think about how even God's culture works or is supposed to work in the midst of and through our people. Especially in that first part where Confucius, or this Zhuangjian Confucius, is criticizing the idea of the shining light of virtue by example, by saying, even in the case that this ruler of Wei accepts and cherishes worthy men, then all that does is make it to where you and your morally upright and exemplary character actually falls under the sway of his own character, his own culture. And so the tables actually are, in a way, turned to where you more or less become subsumed into his light, into his example. And so it ends up with you being the one changed and not him. Because you could argue this many ways. You are seeing things, the negative parts of this ruler from a distance, and in your ignorant but well-meaning heart, you think you're going to go and change that. But you go and you actually get a much better understanding of what is going on there. It doesn't mean any of the negative stuff disappears, but you are given the context for it. And because of your own lack of discernment, which actually came mostly from you thinking your example would change something, you're the one that ends up being changed.
You're going to be subsumed.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty outstanding warning to, and check of sorts to much of the conversation we've had about how we are to be a light to other people and to be very mindful of the culture that we're wanting to build in our people, and as a result of carrying that culture, present it to, or not necessarily present, but naturally carry that culture before other people that maybe are not on the same page as us regarding it. There's a lot of ignorance that can come as a result of thinking that's all it takes, if you understand what I mean. Especially when it's a matter of like us being conscious of the fact that we're carrying some culture that's meant to change other people, and so it's just going to play out that way. But what Miss Confucius is saying is, well, if you do that, you're going to be the one that's absorbed into other cultures and changed by the way other people do things. And be honest with yourself. Do you not already see that working in some ways in your own life? With people you know, or hang out with, or don't maybe even know, but observe through some virtual means, and how that's changing the way that you think about and live your own life. That's definitely the case for me.
Yeah, we were all conduits of what we've learned and internalized.
But with that kind of assumption, with culture building and caring, there's a lot of ignorance that comes along with that.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of assumptions that undermine it, which is, if you've decided, like, I have something to teach this person, you've already made the decision, I, in some way, am loftier than him. I know something he does not. That was not very cool. And then, like, even if you know what you're doing, or, you've convinced yourself you know what you're doing, you should never, mentally, emotionally, you should never stand above somebody. You can no longer help them once you are not on the same footing as them.
But I appreciate now I'm thinking through this first part of it, how it goes even further. So we address the fact that assuming that we carry some way of life consciously and with some sort of driving effort to affect or touch or influence other people's lives. We've addressed that this develops a kind of ignorance in us. Okay, so then what if I was to learn how to go about that effortlessly and naturally without striving and simply be an embodiment of that way, that ancient way, without, we've talked about this too, without trying to affect other people's lives. Well, that is still further criticized. It goes even deeper. That's what's really neat about this to me. Because even this is still some mind project. Even though you're trying to detach it from striving. You're still attempting to be something. So the motive there is a little more, it's more of an ulterior and hidden motive, but it's still a motive. And as a result, it still makes it inevitable that there will be some sort of ignorance in you. Were you going to say something?
My dad taught me that answer to that is just live your life. As long as you're doing it for someone else, it's not going to work. But like, my dad is an unassuming person. He's if you saw it, this is 100%. This is the hillbilly which has not left the mountain in a long time, and he looks like before it's come through with money. He is not very disdain, but like he's not given the time to do it. But when someone breaks down the side of the road, he doesn't think about it. He helps them. That's simply what he wants to do, and they're all smiles and joy after that. He's got a new friend. Same when he goes fishing. Like he goes out to like Nia Bay, and you drive through an Indian reservation, and they're looking at the old white guy, and they're maybe a little less than kind about that. Every fisherman where he fishes adores and loves him. He simply helps them. He's not it's a waste of effort to make everyone like you. You're doing that for you, and like it's useless. Just live your life. If you intend to do good and that's what you're trying to do, you don't have to think any harder than that. It's funny. I consider you become a cult classic in a way like that. You are not known by many, but you are cherished by your few. And I think that's all that matters. Because if you spread that, if that is the influence you give to somebody, they will do that. Everyone will have their cherished few. Just live by example. And the example is not going to be thinking about other people. It is going to be trying to do the best you can.
Even in this example, though, it is not ever addressed by Confucius in such a way as to discourage Yan Hui from going on the mission at all.
True.
Which is an interesting element of this, because it seems like
that.
the way that Confucius is trending in his conversation is like trying to convince Yan Hui that his desire to go there is altogether foolish. But that's never something that Confucius actually says or even indicates. There's something that as Confucius always did, he used a circumstance to address something within the disciple. And that's definitely what happened even in this story from Zhuangzi, you're going to say?
Yeah, no, he critiques every motion of it, but at the same time, he's like, so what are you going to do? What's your plan? And it's an evolving thing. That is true teaching. If he was just, that's dumb.
Right.
There would be no learning.
So that's me. I brought that up to qualify, not to disagree with, but to qualify the statement of just live your life, because it's not. That doesn't mean just forget about what you were originally intending to do there. The vision you had of wanting to see a state brought to a better place. It's not like Confucius was saying that desire on your part was just stupid. It was actually more so the way you're going about that, the way you're understanding it now is severely lacking.
Yeah, it's lacking.
Or I guess you could say it has way too much involved in it because it's being driven by the wrong aspect of yourself, being, as we saw near the end there, the mind. That was another really intriguing thing about me. Sorry, I'm fumbling with my words. That was another very intriguing thing about the story to me, was his discussion on the nature of the spirit and how that relates to stillness or emptiness. There's many different words that can be used there. Things like stillness and emptiness tend to have a very Taoist, Buddhist connotation, but we don't have to carry all of that into the conversation. So I'd be interested to know any impression you guys have about what that part of the conversation was communicating, especially related to what the spirit is. Because it was discussed not only as something you learn to operate in through your own life, but also learn to understand in other men, understand the spirits of men. That word can stretch a little bit to be the hearts of men. It's very ironic too that Confucius ends what seems to be his description of the solution, which is this attainment of no mind or stillness. And he describes what that looks like. If he listens, then sing. If not, keep still. Have no gate, no opening, but make oneness your house and live with what cannot be avoided. And he says, then you will be close to success. He doesn't even say, then you've got it. Yeah. There's like never a full resolution there, but I think he's kind of practicing the very thing he's talking about in putting it that way. Where he doesn't even assume full attainment or even a comprehensive description of what he's even talking about, because it's kind of always beyond your reach. But it's like meant to be that way. It's meant to deeply trouble and disturb a certain way of reasoning through a situation. Mm-hmm. Because you can't do anything from that place of stillness and spirit until those other things are dismantled a little bit, troubled in a way. That reasoning way of planning through or for your behavior in something. And so that's why I thought this was a really interesting example to bring up, as it had to do with conduct and even principles that we hold for ourselves and practicing those principles. Because because it's not a mind game. It's not a system that we have thoroughly understood, can describe eloquently to others, as if that was some way to validate whether or not we do adhere to principles, because it most certainly doesn't. The nature in which a person's way of life actually works through them is a lot deeper and more subtle than that. And that's not even mentioning how that way of life touches other people. Not anything that you can lay claim to, that's for sure. It's just how things of the Spirit are. That's been a question for me for a long time. What does it even mean to be empty?
Yeah, I struggle with the concept of being content as well. It's like, there's always something to do.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, that wasn't a decision you made, is that there's something more to do. Peace and rest is very much an end goal. It is going to be an effect of everything else. So, yeah. I don't know the hunt for it. I don't have it yet either.
I always love those paradoxes that are meant to just kind of tease the audience a little bit. But like, you've heard of walking, but have you ever heard of walking that doesn't touch the ground? You've heard of knowledge, but have you ever heard of knowledge that doesn't know? Like, what the heck is that supposed to mean? But it's again, that's upsetting. It's intentionally and somewhat humorously upsetting a part of you that actually needs to be disturbed before another nameless part of you can begin to function. So like there's actually a power to senseless speech sometimes. I think we've actually all experienced that more than we realize. Especially during what we would describe as spiritual times or events where there's a lot about, say, what someone would do or say about another person, whatever it is, that just didn't really make any sense. Like things didn't connect, or maybe even something that was said seemed blatantly incorrect. But it's not necessarily the logic and reasoning behind the words spoken that mattered. It was actually something a lot. Again, the word is subtle. It was a lot more subtle than that. Because it still changed something. It just didn't change something didn't change things in a very clearly demonstrable way.
Or the frame of mind at the moment was not receptive to it. And then in hindsight, like,
I've already mentioned this before, I think, but that there were a couple of occasions when Emmanuel, especially during spiritual times, would like really get on me about like saying bypass the mind is what he would say. So for me, I was like, okay, maybe it's just do what everyone else is doing and try not to think about it that much. Is that what you mean?
no, it's rich coming from me. I overthink everything, but it really is just live your life. You can always be receptive to learn more, but if you think you know what the right thing is, all that you need now is the discipline to follow it.
Yeah. And that was another interesting part of this passage to me. After Yang Hui had asked Confucius what the fasting of the mind is. And Confucius like corrects himself as he's speaking, but I think in a way that actually is really meaningful. And meaning not to disregard what he had said before, but to see how he qualified himself as illustrating kind of a pattern that you have to go through to reach this place of fasting the mind. So he says, make your will one. Don't listen with your ears, listen with your mind. No, don't listen with your mind, but listen with your spirit. Listening stops with the ears, the mind stops with recognition. But spirit is empty and waits for all things. The way gathers in emptiness alone. Emptiness is the fasting of the mind. So, don't listen with your ears, listen with your mind. Actually, wait, don't listen with your mind, listen with your spirit. But I think that actually, it might indicate like you actually have to go through each one successively in some way.
Yeah.